A. Okay, and it says got it.
Right.
So, having said that, I would like to welcome you to our virtual soiree. We have many readers, and because we have many readers, we have at least 14 readers. We might have 16 readers. It depends on how much time we have. So, I would like to ask each of you to take that into consideration, because the format of the evening is that you are asked to bring one piece, to read it, and then to talk about why you chose it, you know, what it means to you, why this is a special piece for you, why you think this is your best piece, or the child that you like the most at the moment. And the deal is that we're hoping this is kind of an opportunity for us to get to know each other, because in this Corona era, it's difficult to sit in the same room and chat. Also, there are all the geographical limitations. But this way, you know, we can get a glimpse of the person behind the work. So, and as is usual in these things, I'll ask you all to mute yourselves, except for the person reading. And we'll proceed like that. Okay?
Okay.
No questions. Yeah, I'd like to do that. Okay, so the first person that I asked to read.
Does everyone see the shared screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. The first person that I asked to read in this is Mark Levinson, because his poem is titled An Invitation, and I figured it's a nice way to start the evening, to have an invitation. So, Mark, bavakasha.
Thank you. I'll tell you about this poem, and I'll tell you about myself. I sometimes do duty as an editor, and as an editor, I've found that when you ask people to just provide whatever they feel like providing, and it will go into the publication or the program or whatever, then what you get is the material that they can't do anything else with. And so I had no compunctions about doing the same thing. And I put a little subtitle in there explaining that this is a poem from back before anyone had Waze. It's now entirely obsolete. But I'm sure that most of you remember that sometimes you used to receive a wedding invitation, and there was a little map telling you how to get to the place if you were going from the north or from the south, some wedding hall out in the middle of nowhere. So here's the poem. A wedding invitation with a map. Apparently, this love could not be coaxed close to urban transit or even malls. In fact, when did we last see urban love that is not paid for, underage, doleful, messy and temporary as ice cream, or suspiciously over-advertised? So now the windshield visor of your car must hold a map for us as we intrude through unfamiliar suburbs of suburbs to an outpost's glow where, acceding to the DJ well-wishers and alcohol, love may burst in from the adjoining dark like Kong, larger than imaginable.
Very good.
Yay. I can tell you, thank you. I can tell you that in a yeshuv that's close to where I live, Malay Tzvia, people applaud like this. They don't clap. So since we're muted, we can do that. So 2 hands. So thank you, Mark. The next person up, we've changed things a little bit, is Judith, whose name I don't know how to pronounce. Frijessi Niran, is that it?
Second, Frideshi.
Fridashi, okay.
Yeah,
just
Niran.
one moment. Let me just. I can't figure out how to take Mark off.
He's off.
No, he's pinpoint. He's highlighted. No.
Ah,
I don't need to be pinpointed. I'm very happy
I know
being one. Echad Ha'am.
Okay.
okay. Proceed, please.
Okay.
And please tell us a little bit about it.
I think I will do it a little afterwards.
Ah, okay.
Before, maybe I only want to say that thank you for putting me a little earlier. I may have to leave a few minutes before the end. I try to stay till the end, but I'm taking care of my 94-year-old mother, and somebody's replacing me now. And that somebody is a very nervous person. So I have to see how things are going, and I may have to rush off. So here is the poem. Breakfasts are always the same with us, the table, the cups, and our love. Every morning it hangs suspended and resilient, holding onto the tender equilibrium. Yesterday's half-filled wine cups seeking revelation are still unwashed. Though listening to you, I fall out of scholarly purposes. I long for the dream that at dawn caught up with me and now smiles from under the pastel-colored ice lid of the lake of consciousness. My beloved always comforts me for lost reveries and delusions. But this dream, today at dawn, it was one singular, never-seen dream, sent from forbidden galaxies, untouched, pristine, populated with strangers, violet-colored emotions, blushing and pale, glowing panoramas, atmospheres leaping from unknown faces. I kiss you and wish a good day of work. I go to my room, my desk. I go to my computer, eternal, familiar, the same every morning. The dream is gone. I am outside in night and dark without the key to the home. My desktop appears on the screen and the message, try again. Click here for a new password. And the warm weather is holding. I don't know what to say about this. Of course, it's a Nazira, like a Persian Ghazal Nazira, composed. I recomposed a poem of O'Hara, and there is a quotation from his poem, but I recomposed it completely in my way. In fact, I didn't even know I was recomposing it until I opened the volume and I suddenly saw something that was very similar. So it was probably subconscious. And not all my poems are like this, but I liked it after I've written it a long time because it's crazy. You don't know when you are in dream where you are. It's moving very fast, like a movie that's edited the wrong way. Like Bruno Schulz's short stories, of course, O'Hara's poetry is like that. I can never reach that level. Some of Zebad is like this. So I like Jacques Brel said once in an interview when he was told that people are analyzing now your poetry. That was toward the end of his life, end of his career, at least. And he said, I don't write poetry, I write songs. And the difference between songs And poetry is that, he said, that the song has to have an immediate effect. You just understand it right there. And the poem, it always goes left and right, and then you don't really understand, and you have to think about it. And I don't write that way, he said. And somehow, naturally, I always wrote that way, maybe good, maybe bad, but it was always not even understandable for myself sometimes, why I wrote what I wrote.
Okay. Okay.
That's,
So thank you. Thank you. You know, this is another way of us getting to know you, you know, what the process is. Okay, thanks a lot. Our next person is Michael Stone, who will take us to, I think, Armenia. So, Vakasha. Michael, you have to unmute. Michael Kagan, you have to unmute Michael Stone.
Muted me. Yes, there we are. You got me now? Can you hear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. It was an extraordinary evening. I was there on my own, and I went to a restaurant with great emotional baggage, and suddenly everything turned into a poetry. It was most extraordinary. Everything I saw created words in my mind. And yes, so the poem I chose because I remember that evening, so that evening of grace, so remarkably. In looking out, in tourist Yerevan's heart, there's a pool, blue water, black object in it, undefined. I sat in the cafe that she used to like and drank vodka straight. The glitz and glitter skin deep, below my surface, a void. I drank chilled, dry wine, so-called, but not chilled nor dry, and watched the passing regatta. Hand in hand, a couple walks. She as thin as a board, his belly went before them. Then a beard meandering with a donut. A young Chinese couple, hand in hand, 2 local teens, a mother with 2 children by the pseudo lake. A swarthy man passed me with a woman. She had blonded hair, a dress long at the side, short in the front. She had heels as high as the Empire State Building. A bus could pass between the arch of her foot and its heel. Teetering high, she talks energetically and looks at him. Life happens once. Why live false? Okay. Why live a false facade? Yes, I wasn't happy with those last words.
Why not?
Well, I didn't know whether, I think that's perhaps better. I'm not sure. I had why live false, and I thought, why live it false? Why? And then I put that in, I think just before I sent it, and I didn't like that either, actually, post factum. So that's the poem on my evening when the muse visited me very strongly.
You might say, why live in such high heels?
Yeah,
Or why walk in such high heels?
or why cheetah?
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, what it all boils down to is what I think all of us go through at one point or another, that there's a phrase or there's a word or there's even a comma, and you could sit there and agonize about it, and you write version number 1, version number 2, version number 3.
You know, on a computer, you can just change it. Apropos, you did comment before. We were talking about.
Thank you. Now, moving from Armenia, we're going to, I guess, the Kuzari. I think, yes, the Kuzaria. I'm not exactly sure where the Kuzaria is, except that I connected it with the Kuzari, the writing, the Kuzari.
Yeah, yes, that's correct.
Okay, so Libby, bavakasha.
Thank you. I need to change one thing. It's the Howling Women of Rosaria. So that I just did, I printed that wrong. A sestina in honor of Rabbi Pentachia of Ratisbon, Jewish traveler of the 12th century. So this is a sestina. Between the land of Kedar and the land of Rosaria, on a vast flat plain, a gathering of women. All night the women howl and wail, lost fathers and mothers, and the dogs join them, bark and whine, and the daughters learn. This is the way of Rosaria women on the vast flat plain. Petachia of Ratisbon walked on the plain. He walked at night on the land of Rosaria. He hid in the trees. He wanted to learn the cause of the howls, the moans of the women, the cause of the grief of the gaunt barking dogs, the reason those loose-haired daughters wail. From midnight to dawn, they moan and they wail there on the vast Rosarian plain, where the shadows torment the gaunt barking dogs. In the deep of the night in the land of Rosaria, the howls and moans of the loose-haired women became what he wished he never did learn. We think we are strong, we think we can learn why others howl or fall and wail, but there on the edge of Rosarian plain, in the prison of howls of loose-haired women, in the dead of the night in the land of Rosaria, a shadow stands close by the gaunt barking dogs. In the eyes and the hearts of the gaunt barking dogs that tell us the truth we think we can learn, in the dead of the night in the land of Rosaria, in the howling and falling in each single wail, there at the boundary, Rosarian's plain, in the prison of howls of loose-haired women. Howl and moan, all you loose-haired women, you with dark eyes like gaunt barking dogs, for the truth of it all is there on the plain, the truth of it all, and all we need learn is howling and falling and each single wail from midnight to dawn in the land of Rosaria. Dogs they will bark and women will moan, and the wail that rises from Rosaria's plain is the wail of death, and it's all we can learn. So,
Wow.
thank you. It's a very, I will tell you, there are 5 reasons why, there are probably more, but there are 5 reasons why I chose this poem. I've been reading Jewish travelers in the Middle Ages and their firsthand accounts, maybe with Rabbi Petachia, not quite firsthand. He traveled with another person, so maybe it's written actually in 3rd person, so it might have been the other guy writing it. At any rate, I was sort of overwhelmed by the curiosity of Rabbi Petachia. He thought it's late 12th century, and so he crept down and looked at these women that go out on the plain at night and wail all night, and then they teach the wailing to their daughters. So number one, I was really overwhelmed by his curiosity to see that and to kind of sneak forward and look at them. The other thing was I was astounded by a group of people or a culture that was so dedicated to the practice of wailing and death. I tend to be fairly upbeat, and so it kind of overwhelmed me that this could come about. Then there was the challenge of the sestina, which was just a great fun to do. And I really enjoyed working with the more soft consonant sounds that seemed to arise as I wrote. Plain and learn and land and wine, those almost end sounds, lighter consonant, softer sounds. And I was overwhelmed by the names of the places. I just thought they were lovely. So that's the reason I wrote it and like it.
Well, thank you for sharing it.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much. And I guess we'll move from the land of the Kuzari to India and Wendy. Bixstein. I have to move it up a little bit, I think, Michael.
It's okay. I have a slightly different version, an earlier one. Anyway, when I was younger, I lived for a while in India. It was an intense time of discovering a completely new and different culture. The experience was really soul-wrenching. I wrote this poem more than 30 years ago, and for me, it's been a touchstone because it reminds me how turning to poetry helps me make sense of what it means to live in this astonishing, heartbreaking, vibrant world. And here's the poem on the anniversary of Gandhi's death. The streets are filthy in this town, though swept at daybreak by robust, untouchable women with grass brooms. I tread out carefully past 31 years this morning. The beggars are out begging, expressionless as water. The laborers are shaping without tools a hoarded fortress for a rich man's house. In the next street, a ruined palace crumbles. Rag pickers, scarecrows in colorless rags, dart and swoop among the filth, their practiced glittering eyes. Today, a harsh workday like any other. And if at all they think of Gandhi's death, they shove the thought aside to jostle with other incoherent memories. In the secluded courtyard of the Muslim Girls' High School, neatly plaited girls in blue and white sit cross-legged in happy, haphazard rows. 1,000 miles north of here, it is raining. A handful of intellectuals and a few old, fragile men quietly gather. Their passion flares like candles in a dark room as they make vows, hard as thought, small as precious stones. We will never again allow oppression to break the strong hearts and the frail human houses of our people. In my burning city of the South, the birds high up in the tamarind tree slowly spin their threadbare nests meticulously, and the startling bougainvillea spills its bright, soundless bells in the hot sky.
Ah, thank you. The version you read was better than what was on the page, I think.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So the next person is Jacqueline, whose last name I don't know how to pronounce. Challier?
Yeah, Scalia, whatever you like.
Okay, the North Sea is the North Sea. So we're going, we're traveling all over the place.
Yeah, I like diving and I like the sea, so that's why I chose this poem. Saving a herring. My body and I swoop down on the grey North Sea. I tip my goggles and blow them clean. Now we see calm, but for this curtain of rope, quavering before the vicissitude treasure box. Vision draws at the frayed ends and their possible loops where the herring abandoned her coatful. The fish these days doesn't have much hope. If I was bad, I don't know who I'd thank. Untouched by waves or storms scarring the surface, I've got this, the herring thought. A nursery, a shelter where hatchings begin, a rush of water like air, dark holes where I can hide, safe causeways. My mother seems close on the water. It has to do with the time I learned to dive, and she had these big adjustments to make, alone on the edge of her comfortable flat. Between the pulses of striped pajama fish, the herring came investigating and found these whiskers, wagging like tongues, flitting over the honeymoon bed, white anemone polyps, contracting like anuses. Though her belly was bursting, she got pulled to the scene of sticky algae, pink shrimp as fresh as toes sticking out of the juice. I daydream, feel the tingle of scales, I stab, I file. The blade of my knife tries to prod, the knots catch. My shoulder blades contract. Her eye is right under my lashes. The only sounds my mouth beats. I give her a poke, and she floats. There shouldn't remain too much trauma in the fish brain. My body hands me the bag in which we stuffed the ghost net, bits floating out, but the forest that was so cunning lost its catch. I give my body the okay sign. We kick. The holes of the net say we've come up with no treasure. My mother wouldn't be happy with nothing, but I am in this pity of grey.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I must tell you people that when I got all your submissions, I thought long and hard about how to group them. I didn't put them up according to the time that I received them. I tried to group them according to sort of themes and sort of the cadences. So I thought that moving from the North Sea to the stream of consciousness was appropriate. So, Pesach, if you're with us.
Yes, I am here. I'm sorry, my computer kind of just suddenly died. So
Oy vey.
I'm on Coco's computer. You'll see my name is Coco.
Yeah.
And the camera's not working.
Okay.
So I hope you can hear me, but you probably can't see me.
Right. We hear you well. Please proceed.
Okay, so I'll just read them. This is the stream of consciousness. Was a day so fair, such as seldom is seen. I said, this is the day that the Lord hath made. And my beloved said, let us be glad and rejoice in it. So we decided to go on a picnic. We packed up a basket with cold chicken and white wine and a thermos full of coffee and red raspberries for dessert. My beloved packed her flute and I, my weed, and she, her jokes in their relation to the unconscious, and I, my civilization and its discontents, should reading time come upon us. We rambled through the mountain meadow, animated with anemones, boisterous with blueberries, and a lone hawk circled high above as we arrived at the shimmering stream. There was nobody near. We were alone. We were free. We stripped off our clothes and jumped in. The water so clear I could see all my toes. But could my toes, I wondered, see me? I dove under the surface and watched a school of fish swim by. I emerged and said, I am frolicking in the stream. And my beloved kissed me on the cheek. I dove under again and touched the smooth round stones on the bottom. I emerged and said, I am aware that I am frolicking in the stream. And my beloved kissed me on the lips. I dove.
There's more. There's more.
Yes, you have to scroll up. I dove under again and caressed my beloved's pretty little ankles. I emerged and said, I'm aware that I am frolicking in the stream. And my beloved looked me in the eyes and said, who is this I that purports to possess such powers of awareness? And I said, it is I, your own true love, who is aware that I am frolicking in the stream. And she said, is it you, my own true love? Or is it the neurons inside your skull that are aware that you are frolicking in the stream? And I said, oy vey, is me, I'm getting a headache. So I sat up on the bank of the stream and I rolled a joint and I lit it and I inhaled deeply. And I passed it to my beloved and she inhaled deeply and she played her flute and everything was illuminated and the stream of consciousness flows eternal. So the end.
Yeah, I'm just kind of glad that you didn't go on with the kissing, you know, because I was getting nervous. The cheek and the lips, and I didn't know what was coming.
Yeah, I didn't know it was coming next either.
Yeah.
And
Okay, Michael Kagan, I get the privilege because Anne's computer just conked out.
okay,
And so I get the privilege of introducing you. It's a
so
great-
first I will read, and then I'll explain.
That never ever happened before.
Oops.
Okay.
And please mute, please mute, please mute. A job well done. He stood close to her, not quite touching, not quite not touching. He looked into her eyes and saw that flame that he had first noticed, or perhaps that had first noticed him so long ago, although in truth only a few months had passed since their first encounter. A lifetime, a no time, a life's time. Deep in her soul, the flame rose as if to greet him, which, considering the passion of their words and the flights of their imaginings, was probably not a figment of his imagination, lighting up her eyes from the inside like a candle in a carved-out pumpkin. The inner light, her inner light, the light of her soul on fire, burning and consuming. With great trepidation, as if to actually touch would dispel her as an illusion, as an ethereal image of his own fevered heart, his fingers gently landed on her cheeks, but immediately withdrew as if in this reality it would be too much for him or for her to withstand. Without taking her eyes off his, she reached out and took his hands in hers, bringing them up, guiding them, as if he were unable to see, which perhaps was the case, blinded by the beauty of light, by the supernova that erupted between the space of all potential that no longer separated them. He felt the warmth and softness of her touch, her care, as she gently piloted his hands back to her face. He felt a spasm of shivers course through him as she placed his hands on her body, and sensed the sudden intake of her breath as he held them there. Could it be, he thought? Could it be, she echoed. One mind, one heart, one being, one pulse. What mechanisms of the cosmic order had been activated, turned, chimed, primed to make this moment happen? It was not possible. It defied comprehension that from the moment they had first felt each other's presence until this moment, and from this moment to every other moment, was just a roll of dice and nothingness in the absurdity of an uncaring universe. It had been a long time since the blinders had been removed from his eyes, but at that moment, through the closeness of their bodies, he saw not just the being of light glowing in the light, but beyond, far beyond, to the veriness of the divine hand and all the serving angels that had labored tirelessly to support them, to coax them, to bring them to this moment. Or perhaps not. Perhaps it had all been orchestrated so effortlessly, since it hadn't taken much for them to recognize each other. Not years, not lifetimes, although maybe they had been searching for that long, but in this life, immediate. And now that they were here, bound in mutual rapture, he could hear the heavenly sigh of relief, a cosmic hallelujah by the divine entourage that now encircled them for a job well done.
That's lovely, Michael. Really beautiful. Michael is the impassioned scientist.
And I'm back. I'm back. That my computer has never done that to me before.
So let me,
I had
Anne, thank you.
the blue screen of death.
Anne,
Yes, please.
so what I find in my writing is that my writing gets very influenced by my reading. And after I read a style of poetry, I find that I write in that style of poetry. It's not that I lose my own voice, but I also see it as a challenge to see if I can write in somebody else's style, in somebody else's voice. And I had read this book by A.S. Biat, I think that's how you pronounce the name, winner of the Booker Prize, Possession. And it's a beautiful book. It's difficult to read. It's not easy. Her sentence structure goes on. And it's the most beautiful description of a romance that takes place in our time and in past time. And when I sat next to write, this is what came out. Her style, if I could say that I'm anywhere near her style, and this overwhelming love for another human being, for a beloved, on all those levels, and the sense of the cosmic or the divine entourage that brings people together. And that's also influenced by another book, which I highly recommend, called The Coincidence Makers. I've forgotten who wrote it. It was written in Hebrew, translated, and The Coincidence Makers, of that there are all these angels around us that are working so tirelessly, so constantly to help us come together in what we see as coincidences. So thank you for that.
Okay. Now I understand. There's something completely different. I thought, you know, we should not just kind of hear things that are all the same. So Wendy is going to bring us something that's completely different.
Well, hang on. This might seem very frivolous amongst all the very earnest and beautiful stuff we heard this evening, but I was inspired to write this by Pesach Rotem, who gave a wonderful presentation on humorous poetry at the Voices Israel Netanya Residential Workshop. I only write in rhyme if I'm writing something humorous. Most of my poetry, which is much more serious, is free verse. And I don't even watch for rhyming or meter or anything, I just write. But in this case, I did keep to rhyming. There's a few cheats now and then, but it just came out. The Folk Dance Festival. The new Scottish dancer was accident prone. When he joined the group would noisily groan. He can't count, keep in step, he's not very bright. When we go left, he will go right. He'll step on some toes and the ladies will scream. He doesn't know how to dance with a team. But lo and behold, on the festival day, he arrived looking handsome and scrubbed, oh yea, with his cravat and dressed in an elegant kilt. He even counted with a Scottish lilt. 1, 2, turn around, he whispered to self as he gracefully danced to the right and the left. They won the first prize to everyone's delight, the very best team of the festive night. He was called to the judges to receive their prize, and there, to everybody's surprise, the pin of his kilt caught the table, which tore the cloth. Prizes and kilt fell to the floor. The question is, what is worn under the kilt? The audience gasped in a Scottish lilt.
That was great, Wendy.
We know what's under that kilt. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Well, William Friedman is going to read the first of a series of poems that I saw as longing and memory. So please.
Me? Yes, begin. Okay, well, I am going to give the background first because I chose this poem because of the background, really. I chose it not because it's a great poem. I think it's pretty good, but that wasn't why I chose it. I chose it for the subject matter because it's a poem that profoundly moves me. I think more than any other poem I've ever written, and I sometimes cry while reading it, and I will try not to do that this time. But here's the background. I'll try to be as short with it as I can. It's about my father and my relationship with my father, virtually no relationship with my father. My father was a failure. I mean, by all Jewish standards and most others, he was a failure. He had a 3rd or 4th grade education, went out to sell newspapers on a corner to help support his family, and wasn't terribly bright, wasn't well read. Just an ordinary guy. He was decent, people liked him, but there was nothing very special about him. And my brother and I had very little to do with him. We lived in the same house, basically. He married way over his head. My mother had a college education, teacher's college. She became a successful teacher and then a principal of a school. And my father barely went to work. He sat home on some, I don't know how much, what percentage of the time, but he often didn't go to work. He was a wholesale food salesman. He worked for a wholesale food company. He would go to restaurants and ask what they needed, and he would write it down and he would supply it. He would have it delivered. He also had he was a very decent man. He didn't beat us or anything, wasn't cruel, nothing of the kind. But he had a terrible stutter, like you don't see this anymore because children learn how to control it. But he had this kind of jackhammer, head shaking, eye squinting attempt to get out the first syllable, the first consonant. It was horrible. It was very difficult. And then I realized years later that this is probably why he stayed home so often. He must have been quite embarrassed to have to go out and talk to these restaurant owners with that terrible stammer of his. But at the time, he was just seen as the failure in the house, the lazy guy who didn't go to work, didn't earn a living, didn't provide. My mother supported the family, really. And at the age, when I was 12, my parents divorced. And he left, and my main feeling at the time was poor me. I'm the child of divorce, which at the time, 1950, was very uncommon and not to be rooted about. Yes, this was not something one talked about, parents being divorced. So he disappeared, and for years I didn't see him, never heard from him. He was just gone. And when we heard about his mother having died, we went to the funeral, my brother and I, and met him sitting on his sister's couch. The first time we'd seen him in 4 years, and he was in an advanced state of dementia. He hardly knew who we were. So here was this person who at the time I had something like disdain or just disconnected from, who turned out to be terribly pitiable. And I realized later that at that time, again, that also embarrassed me, and we didn't go back. But years later, when I looked back and thought what a sad, pitiful human being he was, and for the first time, I was able to get out of myself as the son of a failed father and see him for himself and imagine what it was like to be him. And I began to feel very, very sorry for him. Years after he died at the age of 60. And when I heard that he had died, my mother called to tell me he had died. And I said, okay. And then I went back to, I was in graduate school, and my roommate said, who was that? I said, my mother. He said, anything important? I said, no. This is shocking. I said, no. And I think I meant it at the time. Anyway, the years after, we're all sort of making up with a flood of emotion and feeling, and I guess you could call it retroactive love or something like that. But I began to write a lot of poetry about him, and this is my favorite among them. It's called Man at Bat. I mean, he rarely did things with us. We rarely did things with him. It was not one of these great father-son relationships. But the one thing he did was occasionally play softball, baseball with us in the park with other children. And that was kind of special because it was so rare that he was out with us and other kids. So this is about that. And I think most of you know enough about baseball. You know that the pitcher throws the ball at a plate, which is next to the batter with the stick. And if he hits the ball and nobody catches it or throws to first base before he gets there, then he's on first and he has a hit. He hit a single. And you can take certain pride in that. That's, after all, what you're trying to do. Okay, so it's called Man at Bat. When I was a boy, my father played softball with us in the city park. The grass was quilted, new mown, and it smelled of limes. The trees around us, eating time and drinking summer heat, watched from their third-tier seats. Branches were mezzanine and bleachers, leaves spectators, and when the wind ran out a routine grounder, they applauded, as leaves do. My mother was at home dusting furniture and wondering how, knowing all the routes and numbers, she had gotten on the bus with the stammering red-haired driver who could not memorize the way, who scraped parked cars, stuttered curses through windows he was afraid to open, and rarely spoke. So did I. That is, I also wondered on every day but this. At the plate, he stared intently at the pitcher, swung with all the smoothness and conviction his life had tripped on in the dark and left behind. At meeting sound, he ran, not from the ghosts who drove him to his soft blue chair on work days, but towards something white as wishes, hard, staked down, and waiting. If he reached first base, hands on hips, he turned to look for me, and I felt for the first of many times how pride could plead. I looked away as though I had not seen. Not every child bears Priam on his back to flee the burning city of an old man's fears. I was not up next and not obliged to move him on. But I'm older now than he ever lived to be, and marching slowly to the plate with a stick of guilt and memory in my hand, I look toward first, see the soft wind working through the orange hairs along his arms like thin-stemmed flowers on a hill. And though he hugs the bag like his mother's knee, I feel my head nod slowly, like the mute, reluctant world when it says yes.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. It really, it makes a difference to sometimes to know the backstory of the thing. I mean, it was a good poem when I read it, you know, but now that I know the rest of it, it's that it makes it that much more so. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Gordon.
Okay, Noel. You spell your name Noel, not Noel? Okay, please, bevakasha. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just did. This is a poem about moments in different relationships. And so it sort of swims in and out of images and times and different kinds of moments. And it's a new poem, so it's not complete yet. It's sort of still simmering. But it's the one that I'm sort of working with. Do you still love him? For Owe, who asked the question. A moment. No need to hurry. There is time. Time to let the moment swirl and settle. Let slow eyes travel the room. Much in this room would be familiar to you. You who never spoke until it was far too late. Look, this wooden box that Jenny made, the blue cover she sewed fitted like a skin, like our friendship, a bright organic thing. Wait a moment. You'd want to go. Would you want to go? In the meantime, I watch the light flow of the stones and shells. Recall, Grandma, Grandma, look what I found. It's for you. It's from the sea for you. My grandson's bright smile, brighter even than the white of the shell, but not brighter than the blue eyes looking up at me. His joy of knowing. There is still time to sit here on the cream sofa, padded by the familiar. What might have been now a superfluous wound, carefully acknowledged. On my writing table, between the devil's ivy and the picture of a Scottish mountain, small white unicorn, clay deer, a round grey stone from Tibet. I have time to let the moment swell, settle. There is no hurry. Thank you.
And thank you. Do you want to say anything more about it other than it's a work in progress?
No.
Okay. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
Helen Sarid. Is Helen Sarid here? I don't see her. Okay, so she's not here. So I guess we'll move on to Simon. You have to unmute yourself though. Yeah.
It takes me a bit of time, but I did. So I don't actually have a favorite poem. I don't, my mind doesn't really work that way, but I do have lots of favorite people. And this poem is about one of my favorite people, my son, who's just had an operation on his wrist. So I thought that in some way this might be a kind of healing incantation. I wrote it on my birthday, my 49th birthday in the year 2000 when he was 16. And it was one of those days where it was a Shabbat morning and he was off and I needed some quiet, so I went to his room and lay down on his bed. It's called Birthday Musings, Double Portrait. The oversized desk and giant bike have completely displaced the matchbox cars and railway lines in a big green case at the top of a cool grained wardrobe. The light green curtains with falling off gold leaves replaced Thomas the Tank Engine, although he still admired. The books and bric-a-brac reflect mixed moods and interests: arts, religion, rocks and crystals, the rings and Monte Cristo. I am getting old, little boy, though I won't admit it in my heart. It's hard to read these words without my new shunned glasses, and the knees react to ups and downs. My hands have little twists and turns, and of course the honeycomb heat of the head erupts from time to time. I hear the blackbirds and the pigeons, the hoopoes and the crows. The sky offers a fresh day, and I'm walking up a mountain, shielded from the emerging sun by the shade your shadow throws.
Thank you. Thank you. It's something to write about your kids.
I have well, I have a whole manuscript of poems about my children. You know, the growing up and the, you know, the need to sleep, the need to write, the be with them.
Yeah.
Did he like the poem?
Yes.
Did my son like the poem?
Yeah.
He does love the poems. Yeah, I've got 3 children. They love the poems. I think what they also really like is the thought that Daddy writes about them. You know, they you know, why does he do that? But yes, he really likes it.
Good.
I think that you'd probably have to get your kids used to you writing about them early, because I know I have one kid who likes poems, but if I wrote something about him and showed it to him, I don't know what he'd think about it. I think he would probably be very embarrassed, I think. But he's a grown-up now, you know, so.
I have a program that runs between Jewish and Arab schools, and that's what I do. This program ran in his school too, in their school. They all went to the same school. And so somebody asked him, you know, are you embarrassed that your dad is like a teacher in the school, you know? And he looked and he said very sweetly, he can't embarrass me any more than he does.
Okay, well, thank you for that. All right. So I don't know if I'm the last one, and if I could be the last person to read tonight, or if there's a chadran, you know, there's a encore. But anyway, I put myself at the end of it because I figured that if anybody was asleep, I would wake you up. The head shop came out of a dream I had during a very, very hard and tumultuous time in my life, where I just didn't know what to do with myself, and I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to decide about things that I had to decide about. And I just wished I could clear my head out, you know, in a good way. And I had, this really was an actual dream, but the way it is on the page, of course, is a little different from the dream. Okay, at the head shop. The man behind the counter looked me over as I staggered into the shop. Full up, he asked. I nodded stiffly. I was afraid to move too fast. The man, George, lifted one hand. It's all right, he said. I'm glad you've come in, but why did you wait till now? There was just so much to deal with. I could barely move my mouth. And then it all began piling up, one thing and then another. It's completely stuffed. Stop talking, said George. He walked around the counter and stood in front of me. He put one warm hand on the top of my head and another under my chin. For a long moment, he studied me in silence. Okay, he said finally, we can begin. You've done this before. You know how it goes, right? No, don't say anything, just blink for yes. I blinked. Good, he said. Now, look up beyond my shoulder, up at that shelf. Which one do you want? They will all fit you. That's the woman's section. Can you tell me? Try. The one in the corner, I mumbled. Brown hair. Ah, he said. Yes, good choice. Okay, let me get it down. Before I knew it, the temporary replacement head was sitting on the counter. You're quick, I whispered. I should be, he said. 30 years in this head shop. Now, close your eyes. It will just take a minute. Again, his warm hands found their place on the top of my head and under my chin. I closed my eyes, felt a slight tug, and blanked out. When I opened my eyes again, I was ensconced in the replacement head, and my real head sat on the counter. George and I looked at my real head. Stuffed, I said, completely stuffed. George grinned. Well, he said, we'll take care of that. I'll send it to the lab. You should have it back in 3 days. Reconditioned? Definitely, said George. We'll lay the contents out and clear up all the duplication we find. Get rid of the sludge. Get rid of all those worry bugs, too. You'll get your head back cleared out and able to function. You won't erase anything important, right? I asked anxiously. George shook his own head. I've never, ever seen that happen, he said. The lab is infallible. Now, do you remember how to manage with the replacement head? He took a step backwards and looked me over. Nod, he said. I nodded. He reached out and pinched something on my neck. It's screwed on okay, he said. A little wobbly, but all right. Just don't go swimming. It might drift away and scare people. Ha ha. See you in 3 days. Bye now. Don't you wish? Don't you wish?
Where
Don't
is
you all
this?
wish? Okay, so that was supposedly the end, but there is this hadran. So Ricky, would you like to read?
And what about Karen?
And Karen is after Ricky.
Yeah.
But you have to unmute, Ricky. Michael, can you unmute her?
Ricky, press the space bar. Ricky, press the space bar. Nope.
Now can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. My cursor wouldn't work. Okay. Well, it's been a great evening and so many wonderful images. And I guess by way of explanation, I'm a very visual person. I used to make films, and I would have loved to have been a great photographer or artist, but I try to express it in words. And I do some of my best writing, I think, when I travel, because at home, unlike Simon, when I have all these grandchildren and children around, I don't have time to write, or not enough. But when I travel, I keep a notebook, and some lovely things, I think, come up, at least for me. And I decided tonight to choose something that wasn't personal, because as I get older, I sometimes think I reflect too much on the past. But this poem is the past, but not my past. It's our past, and has a very visual connection, which I'll show you at the end. Oh, and I wrote it after a trip we took to Turkey with a group, where we went in the path of Abraham. We went from the south through Seli Urfa, which is supposed to be where Abraham was, and up to the north, up to the Black Sea. But this poem, as you'll see, was written in the middle. Rachel. I found her where she'd always been, my Rachel, in Haran. Beside the village well, she stood, just as the Bible said, and she was far more comely than all the words and pictures in my head. A Gauguin skin, thick auburn hair, and eyes green as the sea she'd never seen, nor would, in that sere land where yellow dust blows up in clouds and gnats dance in the air. Instead of a clay water jug, she held an infant wrapped in rags. Another pulled her arms. Her arms were thin. She was so small, a child herself. and yet her gaze was bold. She mocked me with those sea green eyes. So I turned and fled and left her there in Haran, where she now weeps and waits for me, my Rachel, mother, matriarch, mine. And I'd like to show you this picture. Can you see this? When I saw this young girl in Haran, I connected it with a picture in the cover of the National Geographic in 1985, I believe, with a young girl with piercing green eyes. I've never forgotten that photo. And it's so interesting to me that the connection was immediate and I just had to write the poem.
Do you know, Ricky, that they tracked down this girl
Yes.
20 years later, 30 years later or something?
Yeah, I was going to bring that photo and I thought, oh no, it'll spoil it because she now looks like a creased old woman and she's not that old, you know. You can see that what she's been through in those years. And when I looked at it again, that gaze, I don't know, that gaze stayed with me forever. Yeah.
Well, thank you for the visual poem. It was, yeah.
It's been an evening of visual, you know. There's so many images. Yeah.
She looks menacing, the girl, angry.
Yeah. It's frightening. Yeah.
So this is our last guest of the evening, Karen. You're going to wrap it up, and please.
I'm kind of overwhelmed by the poetry this evening. I've got to tell you this. That I didn't expect it. I didn't expect to be moved in so many different ways. And I really want to thank you all. Amazing. All right. This poem is more about my history than anything else to me. Because when I first started teaching it at Tel Aviv University, I was teaching whatever they told me to teach. And I was doing research, and I was doing research about women. And there was a course I was supposed to teach that included a lot of Goethe's Faust and Marlowe's Faust and all kinds of Nathaniel Hawthorne, young Goodman Brown, all kinds of works that included a deal that a man made with the devil that he thought he could get out of, you know, that kind of the Faust theme. And I loved that, but I really loved my research, which was about women's poetry. And one day they took me into the big office and said, listen, you'll never get anywhere by writing research about women. You can't write about women. And all I could think about was, how can I get back at them? Because all I could think about was, you know, all right, I can't write about women, so I wound up writing about how women are always the object in dramatic monologues. They're always the person someone talks to before they kill her, you know, or maybe she's dead already, or maybe, you know, maybe she's been dead for a long time. But there's, you know, it was about silencing women. And I started thinking about what would happen with a woman if she were to make a deal with the devil. You know, what she wouldn't think, oh, I can get out of this later, you know, I'm too smart for him. She would think she could convert him, right? And at the same time, I kept getting letters from friends in the States who told me that they had been at a concert with with the Rolling Stones, and they had met Mick Jagger and they slept with him. And I thought, wow, you know, this is what the background for this poem is. It's called Sympathy for the Devil because it's Mick Jagger, and it's about the deal that women would make, right? So here it goes. Sympathy for the devil. Even you, Prince, are sometimes blind, living so deep in darkness as you do, sure that evil is easy as egotism. That someone like you, someone like me, would savor your sort of loneliness. relishing those seductive days, nights in empty beds. What can I say? Yours is such a masculine way. And when we met that night at the crossroads, I walked a piece with you, watching the twisting of your walking stick, wishing I could soothe all the writhings in your world. I thought to cradle you like an agonized disciple in my bountiful lap. Didn't even hear of all the offers you made of wisdom in exchange for my soul. Even when you flashed the contract, securing my signature, I wasn't paying attention, bedeviled by that pain in your eyes, that need for something good. Dare I call it love?
Ah, ah,
Terrific.
yeah, yeah,
Sure, we're sure we can convert them.
yeah. Well, you're right.
I didn't think we would have time for me tonight, and I thought I could get that out.
That's it.
I'm glad you didn't.
Do you
And
know
I-
the movie Angel on My Shoulder with Paul Mooney?
Yeah.
Oh, I remember the title. I remember Paul Mooney, but you don't remember.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And it's about a guy who makes a deal with the devil. It's wry and clever. Yeah.
It's a comedy.
Yeah.
Well, people, I also didn't know how long the evening would take, because you take a chance, I figured if I asked everybody to bring in something that was about 3 minutes long and then to talk about it, some people, needed to speak longer and some people kept their remarks very brief. And I didn't know if everybody would take it as an occasion to talk a lot. So I'm really glad this all worked out, and I really enjoyed listening to you all. I really enjoyed all the pieces that you brought in, all of them. They're all different. They're all interesting. The backstories just made me appreciate them more. So thank you all so much for this evening.
Thank you, Anne, for organizing it.
And thank you, Anne, and it's,
Yes.
I think that most of our evenings, but this particularly, when we planned the evening, the events committee, we said we want to get to know one another better. And I think this has really been, from that point of view, too, a very successful and to be continued. I think.
Yeah. It's a nice thing to do.
Yeah.
Sorry. I love to hear people. I love to hear the way everybody reads. I just think it's crucial to like hear poems as, I guess, as we hear them. So it's not just getting to know each other. It's I like that. I loved it. Yeah, thank you.
And like you said, wonderful to hear what everybody's reading and thinking about. Just really a pleasure.
One has to be quite brave because, sometimes you try out reading something different from what you usually write and you want to see the reactions. So there's a bit of bravery comes into it as well.
Yeah.
There has to be bravery because we're always daring something, and it's usually our souls. If it isn't that real and that important, then why have we written it? Why do we want to share it? So you're right. I agree with you.
And
I think being together also alleviates the isolation. I don't know about you all, but many people write in isolation. I certainly do. And I appreciate being together.
Yeah, I think so. The readings today triggered so many other poems in my mind. I think it would be interesting with you read things and I thought of things. I think it was yours. I went to Turkey and there was this town called Diyarbakir, a city that was very hard to pronounce. And I wrote, it tangled my tongue, but I thought, gee, I would have loved to have read my poem at that very moment. Maybe we could think of a way of doing it, an association, because there were so many associations as each one of you read, I thought of things that I wrote or others wrote that related, and it made it a very complete evening for me. But I could have gone on for a long time.
Another stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share with you all that a couple of nights ago I listened to a BBC podcast, a show called Start the Week, and it's always a very intellectual, beautiful conversation between the facilitator and three very esteemed personalities, and the subject always around the subject. And the subject this week was awesomeness. And I'll send you all the link. But as I listened, I realized that that's what we're trying to achieve in our writing and in our poetry, which is to touch a sense of the awe, of the awesomeness of life. And it was very powerful, and it happened a few times this evening that I took my intake of breath. Wow, a word, a phrase, an image, and it's that moment that is awesome. And so I thank you all for that. Thank you, Anne, for putting it together.
What I found very useful is having everything on Zoom, because living in Haifa, and many of your real life activities, face-to-face activities, are in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. It's much easier for me to come onto Zoom. In Voices, we have gone back to face-to-face meetings in groups, but many of our members and of yours are working in isolation, and that is more difficult.
Well, we always work in isolation. I mean, in the end, when you write something, it's between you and you, but then you have to shatter that wall between you and the rest of the world. I mean, I know that when I started to share the things I wrote for many years, many years, I was like in the closet, I didn't show anybody anything. And it's only, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago or something, maybe, that I started to show people anything that I wrote. And those first few times that I did that, I would hand over the paper and start to sweat, And the people would be silent, whoever it was reading the thing, and I would think, I have to sit down. It was really difficult, so this is just one more way of doing it.
I really enjoyed this. I'm really, really, really sorry. And it was wonderful. I also wrote it in the note, but it was just really great. Thank you so much.
It's so wonderful. We Libby is in California. Petit is in Budapest. I mean, we've been able to get together from all over. But I really think it's Michael, and as a wonderful organizer this evening, you did, it was amazing. And Reuven is next month on the 22nd of January.
25th. 25th.
I'll be there on the wrong day anyway. and just, but there's going to do much more of this. I think we have schedules that David Browner is going to publicize, David and Libby and I-Cord, and it's just I think this is an inspiration. You write alone, but you need someone to say yeah or no. And no is also good.
Okay. Well, okay. So thank you, Michael, for making the scroll and for scrolling it.
Definitely.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you,
and
everybody.
thank you, Mark, for the putting up spreading the word.
Yes, absolutely.
Very enjoyable. Yeah.
And
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Oh, yeah. Happy
Good writing this year.
Yeah. Okay. Signing off.
Right about. Okay.
Okay.
Good night,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Okay. Good night, people.